We'll stay with that issue. Neville Wran, the former New South Wales Premier, of course, national president of the Labor Party, used to say that the best thing about the working class is getting out of it. Now, that's an attitude that the current Prime Minister, A-list Albo, seems to have taken to heart. With his avid attendance at celebrity events, his impending abandonment of his electorate for a cliff-top mansion on the Central Coast, and with his obvious reluctance to sit down the back of the plane, even on a private holiday trip. Today, after 5 days of twisting and turning, he's finally released a statement emphatically denying that he'd ever telephoned Alan Joyce for an upgrade to business or first class. Well, that took a long time to get that statement, didn't it? Meaning that for days, he obviously thought he had made calls. It's partly why he ran that bogus line about a hotline that no one has ever heard of.
Did you call Alan Joyce personally for these upgrades?
Look, the idea, Qantas have a number in terms of bookings that are private bookings.
Well, clearly he got the upgrades, all 22 of them. So who was it that he called, if not Joyce himself? Because $10,000 upgrade gifts don't just happen, I could tell you. Sherry Markson thinks the PM's mate Andrew Parker might have been involved. Parker, the former Qantas Government Affairs executive, reportedly handled upgrades for MPs. Never in my time, but that's the story, so it goes. And he was so close to Albanese that Albanese even turned up to Parker's home as opposition leader for his housewarming in 2019. Other media reports today, they name former Qantas insider, now the Prime Minister's number 2 staffer, David Epstein, is another likely name who helped get his Labor mate a seat at the pointy end of the plane. In the end, the issue isn't so much about how he got the upgrades, but the fact that as a Transport Minister in charge of regulating the aviation industry, he accepted them. When Transport Minister, the one under John Howard, John Anderson, he says, when I was Minister, I never accepted an upgrade because it was a clear conflict of interest, a matter of integrity. But put the PM's love of a perk to one side for a moment. What's most telling here is the general disdain that the left elite have for ordinary people. You see it today in the FOI that's just emerged from the office of former Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews, referring to members of the public who were worried about his draconian lockdowns as, quote, pig-headed know-it-alls. We saw it with the left's constant sneering at anyone who opposed The Voice. Let's not forget that was 60% of the public in the end, called dinosaurs and dickheads.
If you don't know, find out what you don't know. What that asinine slogan is saying is if you're a dinosaur, a dickhead, who can't be bothered reading, then don't know.
Bet Ray Martin's not laughing now. I mean, above all, though, we see it in the left's general contempt for anyone who doesn't share their worldview.
You could put half of Trump supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables. Right? The racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic, you name it.
That line about a basket of deplorables cost Clinton the 2016 election, haunts her too to this day. Just as this will likely cost Kamala Harris her shot at the top job.
Puerto Rico, where I'm in my home state of Delaware, they're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters.
That line, well, it enabled Donald Trump today, ever the showman, to turn up driving a garbage truck to ram home the point that elite lefties despise the working people whose votes they're desperately trying to harvest.
I think that the comment made by really both of them, because there are really two of them, about being garbage, maybe 250 million people, they shouldn't be talking. That's like deplorable for Hillary. This is the deplorable for Hillary. And I think this is worse, actually. for Joe Biden to make that statement, it's really a disgrace.
That's a campaign bullseye. In Western democracies like ours, political demography has been shifting for a generation at least. Think the Reagan Democrats, Thatcher's blue-collar Tories. Here in Australia, the Howard Battlers. In those days, though, while aspirational people were more and more likely to vote to the right, so too were the well-off. These days, the more income you earn, the more likely you are to vote Green or vote for their rich sisters, the Teals. Hence the left's attitude to the voter on Struggle Street who doesn't agree with them. It's a mixture of Green sanctimony and old-fashioned elitist snobbery. Despite the reality that Labor governments can't win without the working people of Western Sydney and Melbourne, who vote Labor more out of habit now than any affinity with the Green left snobs who now run what was once the party of the worker. Politically, Anthony Albanese's obvious fondness for life's luxuries, that's deadly, because it shows how out of touch he is now with Labor's former working class base. Whatever he is these days, notwithstanding growing up in public housing with a single mum on the pension, he's no longer one of them. That's why a lot of former Labor voters are starting to feel conned. It's not that he just hasn't delivered on promises like cutting their power bill, boosting their wages, easing the squeeze on mortgage and rents. It's more that he's not the kind of person he said he was, and that's lethal. It's why his backbench is increasingly worried. It's why his strategists are pulling out all stops for an early election. Now, I know that Labor is buying up ad space. They're madly getting candidates named in every seat, something the Libs, I have to say, have not done yet. And they're flooding the airwaves with more and more government advertising to win you over. It's why I'm sure the election will be held as soon as possible, a lot earlier than the Prime Minister has indicated. It won't be May. In my view, he'll call it in early February for March, before a new budget makes the red ink and deficits more obvious, before the government's forced to declare its new climate targets that will inevitably impact on the price of the food we eat, the cars we drive, as much as the current targets have hit our power bills, before ministers have to deliver bad news, like Tanya Plibersek, who's likely to shut down Tasmania's salmon farming, and with it the thousands of jobs in the must-win seat of Lyons. Now, yes, Labor wants a rate cut before it goes to the polls, but it's now becoming obvious that the longer they wait for that rate cut, the more damage the Prime Minister is inflicting on the Labor brand. Once a positive for the battler, Albanese is now becoming a liability the longer he stays in the top job, as everyday voters come to understand that Albo from the Commission flats is not one of them anymore.